All right, let's jump right into this month's AI Security Insights, where we're going to break down some of the latest findings from the field.
So here's what we've got on top. We're going to start with model exfiltration and analysis. Then we'll get into runtime and C2 channels. And we'll wrap things up by looking at credential and service abuse.
Okay, let's get into it. Our first section is all about model exfiltration. We're going to be looking at how the model layer itself can become a target in these attacks.
First up, MindGuard put out some pretty fascinating research. It details exactly how they were able to pull out the system prompts from OpenAI's Sora model, and they did it using some really clever cross-modal techniques.
The attack path they found is just so interesting. They started with the obvious, direct text prompts asking for the instructions. And Sora just flat out refused. So next, they tried hitting it with video and image prompts, but all they got back were these partial or kind of garbled results. But here's the breakthrough. It was the audio channel. By asking Sora to just narrate tiny little snippets of text, they could generate clean audio clips. From there, it was just a matter of transcribing them and stitching all those little fragments together to reconstruct almost the entire system prompt. This is a perfect example of a huge risk with these multimodal models, right? Even if you lock down one output format, like text, another one might leave a side channel wide open for exfiltration.
So, moving from exfiltrating a model to analyzing with one, Checkpoint Research did this great piece showing how generative AI can be a massive force multiplier for reverse engineering malware. In this case, they were taking on Xloader.
And they explored two pretty different workflows for this. On one side, you've got this live integration using what's called the Model Context Protocol, or MCP. Just think of this as a framework that gives the AI, hands-on agentic access to all the tools. It could directly control IDAPRO, the x64DBG debugger, and a VM to basically experiment in real time. The other way they did it was a completely offline pipeline. They just export the IDA database and the binary and dump it all into the ChatGPT environment. This let the AI do all its static analysis in this secure, self-contained bubble. No live connection needed, which of course makes the whole process repeatable and way easier to share.
So, what was the payoff? Well, if you look at the numbers, the entire process to unpack the Xloader sample took just under 40 minutes. But what's really telling on this slide is that most of that time was just static analysis. See those 39 calls to the live tools? They were all packed into one 9-minute burst. And that was specifically when the AI needed to fire up the debugger to capture crypto keys in real time.
All right, let's pivot to our next section, which is all about runtime and command and control channels. Here, we're looking at how the very infrastructure that runs AI and the APIs that connect to it are being compromised.
So first up here, Sonar Research uncovered some remote code execution vulnerabilities in the Allama framework. And if you're not familiar, that's a really popular tool for running large language models right on your own local machine.
And sticking with this theme of abusing infrastructure, Microsoft Incident Response found a pretty novel backdoor. They've named it Sesame Op. And get this, it uses the official OpenAI Assistance API for its command and control. The way the C2 loop works is entirely through the API. It's actually pretty slick. So the backdoor on a compromised machine, it queries the Assistance API using a hard-coded key. It's looking for an assistant object where the description field is set to payload. If it finds one, boom, it grabs the command, decrypts it, and runs it. Then it takes the result, encrypts that, and posts it right back to the same thread. And to signal that the job is done, it creates a whole new assistant and just sets its description to results. It's a completely covert channel, all using legitimate services.
Now, this kind of abuse of legitimate infrastructure, it's not an isolated thing. Alligo Security reported on a very active global campaign they're calling ShadowRay 2.0. This one hijacks Ray-I infrastructure, which is a popular distributed computing framework, and basically ropes it into a self-propagating botnet. One of the key indicators of compromise for this ShadowRay botnet is the presence of a specific file path, /$/com. The malware uses this path to try and masquerade as a legitimate kernel process, trying to hide in plain sight.
Okay, for our final section, we're going to shift focus over to credential and service abuse. So we're looking at attacks that exploit stolen credentials and these new rogue AI services that are popping up.
So in a write-up they called Supapon, Hacktron AI detailed a compromise where their initial entry point was an orchestration system, and that ultimately gave them the keys to production database instances. So how they pull it off?
Well, the crucial piece was a set of credentials for an orchestration API that they found just hard-coded inside a deployment script. And as this quote shows, those credentials, combined with the internal service URLs that were also in the script, gave them direct administrative access to the systems managing all those databases.
Now, from compromising legitimate services, we're going to move to criminals who are just creating their own. Trend Micro did a deep dive analysis of a service called Xantharox, which is basically an LLM as a service that's being marketed specifically to malicious actors. What's really wild here is the massive gap between what Xanthrix advertised and what it actually was. I mean, the ads claimed it was this fully self-contained, custom-built LLM running on private servers. The reality? Trend Micro's analysis found it was really just a jailbroken Google Gemini Pro model running on Google's own infrastructure. The ads also claimed it was trained on all the latest data, but the fine-tuning was really just about its personality, not its technical knowledge. Just a huge disconnect between the marketing and the actual tech. And of course, Google responded to the findings. They confirmed that Xantharox was accessing their models in clear violation of their policies and said that they take this kind of misuse seriously. So, if we pull all of this together, you can start to see some clear attack themes emerging. First, exfiltration is happening through these non-text, multimodal channels. Second, attackers are absolutely abusing legitimate third-party APIs for covert command and control. Third, big compromises are happening because of credentials just exposed in infrastructure as code. Fourth, we're seeing malicious services being built right on top of commercial AI platforms. And finally, these distributed AI compute frameworks are being hijacked to build botnets. Really, all of these findings just go to show that as AI systems get woven more and more deeply into our core infrastructure, we're just going to keep uncovering new and more complex attack surfaces.